You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ13 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundless success to join today. Let's get you to the next level. Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase, the podcast that helps you succeed in your business, life, and career. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group, and with me as always is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How about you, Eric?
I'm doing excellent. Yeah, it was a pretty big weekend for the Success Showcase family. Yeah, Chip had a birthday.
Yep.
He's now a year older.
I'm starting my 72nd rotation of the sun. There you go.
And I spent the weekend raising money for the Support Info Go initiative. We had our annual bike ride fundraiser, which was great despite the rainy weather that we had to endure. And, you know, it was a very complicated endeavor, which is actually what led me to the topic for today. Because if we did not have everything set up as processes, we could never get this done. And again, it really was a massive undertaking, numerous people coordinating across different organizations, and it's an annual event. So each year, we learn a little more and add that to the processes for the following year. So today we're going to talk about how important processes are and how powerful they can really be in both your business and your life.
Yeah. Obviously, using my old AI assistant. I mean, this is not rocket science that we're teaching you today. I think a lot of this we're just bringing in as far as awareness to you folks out there. But basically, processes, they provide your structure, consistency, clarity, improved efficiency, reduced errors, communication, and they facilitate a whole lot of other things if you're in the training business, training and knowledge, retention, and so on and so forth. But obviously, your processes, it all starts on paper, and you are a whiz at this. You've been doing this, not only for your support info, but for so many other things over the years. And, it's so important to just get things down on paper, and a lot of it starts with the same types of things. But if you get that down once and then you debrief after right away when it's done, you're going to keep improving on things as things move ahead. And obviously, you have a few very, very fine-tuned products out there as a result of processes.
Absolutely. And that's something people don't realize. You create a process. For the most part, your process should not stay static. Things are always changing. You're always learning new things, new software, new technologies, different ways to make things easier or give it higher quality or make it faster. So you need to reevaluate processes on a regular basis. But when you start off, your processes need to be as simple as possible. The idea is that you start with the most basic item, making the assumption that whoever has to follow this process, even if you're creating it for yourself, has no idea how to do this. And I give this example often. I got a call, this is going back a ways, got a call from my mother in law. She needed help with her computer. And I said, well, what's the problem? She said, I can't get into Microsoft Word. Well, okay. So at the time, Microsoft Windows was set up with the start button at the bottom, and you click the. So I said, you go to the start button, click it, and a menu will come up, and you need to find Microsoft Word in that menu. She said, I don't see a start button. Okay. So we go back a little further. I start to describe the start buttons in the lower left-hand corner. What do you see there? Nothing. Okay, what do you mean nothing? What's on the screen? Nothing's on the screen at all. It's black. Okay, so your problem obviously isn't getting into Microsoft Word. Is the light on the computer on? No. Oh, so you don't even have the computer on yet. Okay, so the first thing is turn the computer on. And she says, I don't know where the power button is. It's a brand new computer. So the process that we had to create for her literally started with, where is the power button? When you're creating processes, you have to make the assumption that the person that's going to do this process knows nothing. One of my first jobs was doing customer service for General Electric. And we were told on day one, when somebody called in for service, the first question we had to ask was, is it plugged in? And I thought, what a stupid question that is. Who would call customer service if their appliance wasn't even plugged in? Well, as it turns out, not such a stupid question. More often than not, the answer was no.
Yeah.
So
It's,
you need to make a process as simple as possible. Never assume that people know what they're doing.
yep. Yeah. There's the old phrase that we know that he who assumes makes the first three letters out of the And as soon as somebody learns, okay, find the power button, turn the thing on, and so on and so forth, that's probably how they feel when they learn that. But they're saying, okay, this is where it has to start. So absolutely, you have to start the very, very basics, and that saves you a whole lot of time, I'm sure. And obviously, yeah, it just saves it's time saving for that person at the help desk for sure.
Certainly. And there's an exercise that coaches do that they tell the client, okay, and this is generally done for folks that who are in corporate. Write down a process to take a coffee break. And generally the first thing that people write down is get a cup of coffee. Well, that brings up the question, well, do you have a coffee maker at your desk? No. Okay. So where's the coffee maker? Well, it's in the kitchen. Okay, so you just left out a whole bunch of steps. First step in taking a coffee break would be get up from your desk and go to the kitchen.
Yeah.
The simplicity is important. Because when you're putting these things down, especially when you're using a checklist, you want the list to remove any doubts, any questions. You want somebody to be able to follow the directions easily without having to figure anything out on their own. That's why you're putting the process together in the first place, to remove that guesswork later on. So start by making things as simple as possible. And the checklist is the most basic type of process. When what you're doing can be done by simply following a recipe, then that's where you have the checklist.
Yeah, I would imagine too. I mean, once you come up with that checklist, you just use the example of how to do a coffee break. Process one on that checklist is making the cup of coffee. It's not writing up the whole thing. And if you just write down the whole logical sequence of things, you're going to realize you got to write up a process for this, 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 and
Yeah,
this. And they all go together logically. And obviously, again, if you're at that help desk, just by asking a few questions, you can figure out where they are in their process.
exactly. Now, of course, some processes do get more complicated, and you can't just use a checklist for those. So, for those, you use a flow chart, and that's where different decisions have to be made. So, is this a yes or no question? If the circumstances are yes, then you do this process. If it's no, you do this process. And anybody who's familiar with flowcharts will know sometimes these will double back on themselves as the situations evolve. So you have to figure out what is your end goal and work backwards. This way, you're getting every step in from from where you want to end up to where you actually are. If you can do it and with no decisions, that's your checklist. If you need to have a decision tree, that's your flow chart and you follow it. Now, one thing that a lot of people ignore when they're putting together processes is resources. What resources do you need? We talked about the coffee break. Well, if you're going to make yourself a cup of coffee, at the very least, you need the coffee. You need a cup. You need a coffee maker, unless you're using instant, which I don't know anybody that still does that. Um, you need water. So when you're putting together your process, you need to make sure you've actually got all of the resources you need to complete that process. And you really don't want to be running around halfway through the process, rounding up the things that you forgot to get. So, part of putting your process together has to be putting together a resource list. Now, on previous podcasts, we've actually talked about this planning method as using a recipe to put this together. So, your ingredients are your resource list. The recipe itself is the process, and you can have a picture, from the cookbook. That's your end goal. That's where you want to end up. So you want to make sure you've got all of these things set before starting to put things together.
Yeah, I love the recipe analysis. Just as you were starting to talk of that, I was writing down the word recipe, and it's like we've been doing a lot of podcasts together.
Yes,
It's so important. But if you are going to make something, and cooking is a perfect example, yes, what are the ingredients? What are the how-tos? Plain and simple.
exactly. If you can, and that's the key to a good process, is it should be as simple to follow as a recipe. Now, that being said, I've seen some truly horrible recipes that leave too much to chance. Because I remember I saw what I termed the world's worst grilled cheese recipe because it left too much to the end user to decide. Because it would tell you, okay, first you need your bread, but it didn't specify what type of bread. So you would pick whatever type of bread you want. By the same token, it didn't specify the types of cheese to use. So if three different people followed that recipe, they're going to get three different results because they can choose different bread, they can choose different ingredients. That's not a good process. A good process delivers a consistent end every time. That's part of the point of it.
Yeah, so the more specific you are when you're putting this together, especially when you're talking about food and things like that, the better off you're going to be. So obviously, if you're going to be doing grilled cheese, there's several different types you can do. And once you write down the steps, bread, this, that, and whatever, you can write it down a different one for the different types that you have. And this is how you put together your specialty menu in your grilled cheese shop and things like that. But it all starts with what you're doing specifically. Because, I mean, if you're going to take like a little piece of sandwich bread and put on a 4-inch thick slice of cheese, it ain't going to work.
Right. So the level of specificity is required. You have to be as specific as possible. Now, when do you need a process? Well, the truth of the matter is you should have a process for just about everything. Whether it's your business, what you're doing at work, what you're doing at home, you may not write all of them down, but there should be a process. You know, doing the dishes. How are you doing this? Well, stack the dishes in the sink. How do you want to stack them? I tend to stack them, largest to smallest so that they stack easily in the sink and they fit into the drain board properly. And you can use different tools. And that's actually something that never ceases to amaze me, that somebody will use something like QuickBooks or accounting software at work, and then they'll completely ignore the possibility of using something like that for their home budgets. You'll use to-do lists when you get to the office, but you'll forget things at home because you don't use a to-do list. The same resources that you use for work can be used to make your life run smoother. The same types of processes. Again, you're following a recipe. Well, most of us don't follow recipes at work. We follow processes. But at home, we're following recipes. Well, it's the same thing. We've also talked about this in the past where we talk about traditions. Well, what makes a tradition a tradition? It's something you do over and over, and you do it because it makes you feel a specific way. People have holiday traditions because it makes them feel good. Well, a tradition is nothing more than a process. The goal of that process is to make you feel good. So, why wouldn't you use processes in your day to day life to make things easier for you?
Yeah, and I know I've talked about this many, 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 many times. The power of an Excel spreadsheet. As I've told everybody out there, I got my accounting degree before there were even spreadsheets or computers. But once that came out, a simple tool like a spreadsheet, which is nothing more than rows and columns, allows you to write down a whole lot of different things. And if you put a column in front of that for numbering things, you can automatically put them in order and you can adjust them and do those things. And as you know, I use that for my weekly calendar. I have 6 weeks in front of me at all times, and I do have my yearly calendar there, and I update this thing weekly just by printing out the next 6 weeks, which is just the times of day down the left side and the days across the top for the next 6 weeks. I scribble on that all week long as new stuff goes in, and At the weekend, what I do is I wipe out this week and add another week and keep that thing going. For my gratitude journal, basically, I have now 11 years. All I have is dates of the year down the left side and a column for a comment on the right side. Fill in the blank. I've been doing that for such a long time. Spreadsheets are just an easy way to write down things. This could be vacation lists, anything else that you're doing, just write them down there. And by saving that and duplicating a sheet and just sorting things out and so on and so forth, you can really come up with a great system to make that whole thing work. So to me, that's one of the best tools out there. But I'm sure is process software out there that maybe you can recommend the people out there to simplify the process too, where you just type the items in and the list comes up in front of you and you organize it and do it that way. So, but if you can start by writing things down and getting them organized on paper and have a method of doing that, that is the start. And if you forget something, just write it down all week and then add that to your sheet at the end of the week. That's what I do is I go back to everything daily for my gratitude journal and then weekly for my calendar.
Yeah, there's all sorts of software you can use. Some gets very complicated, others tend to stay simple. But I mean, all you really need is a pen and paper to do this. And if you think about it, again, terms like processes, operations, they sound very intimidating. But when you think about it, you're already using processes in your day to day life. We talked about recipes. Every recipe is a process. So anytime you're cooking dinner and you're following a specific recipe, you're using a process. Directions. If you have to go somewhere and you've never been there before, your turn by turn directions that either you've written down because your friend gave them to you or you're following your GPS. That is a process. It's first go 2 miles straight, then make a right turn. That's what a process is. So there's nothing intimidating about processes. And in fact, they tend to make things easier because you're not figuring things out on your own. Can you imagine being told you need to go to a store on the other side of town that you've never been to, you don't know what street it's on, and you don't have directions, a map, or a GPS? How are you going to get there? Well, the odds are you're not going to get there. When you try to cook something, you know, yes, you can experiment, but over time, you're going to hit something you like. And if you haven't been tracking what you did, you're never going to be able to recreate it. So there's all sorts of processes that we use. And one of the things that is so important about processes is that, yes, they do provide a way to get the same result over and over again. But even more importantly, because you're not trying to figure it out over and over again, they reduce your stress. They take the pressure off of you. When you want to make something for dinner, are you more likely to just guess at the ingredients of the dish and then figure out how to cook it? Or are you going to go online and search for a recipe to make it? Well, most people will search for the recipe. Why? Because that gives you the step by step directions you need. It tells you everything that you need to get to make sure you have the resources, in this case, the ingredients, and you follow along step by step. Even when you're dealing with prepared foods, you'll take a box out of the freezer, you'll look at the directions on the box. Now, for a lot of us, we'll take the food out of the box, throw the box away, and then have to go back to the garbage to get the box out to make sure we're following the directions. But that's another process. It's all about making your life simpler and getting more things done without the stress. And and let's face it, There's enough in life to stress us out. We don't need to be adding more to it. So
Yeah,
being able to systemize all these things and create the processes, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to have processes. You tend to make processes when you don't even realize it, like trying to put your child to bed. What do you have them do? Well, it's the same thing every night. You'll they finish up their homework or they finish up watching TV. Go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, wash your face, put your pajamas on, get into bed. We'll read you a story. Lights go out. It's time for bed. It's simple, but that's a process.
absolutely. And one of the best benefits of this too, which we talk about a lot of times, a lot of times our self-esteem is low and it's self-inflicted. By putting things into processes and having them done and making things a lot easier for yourself, you are going to experience a whole lot more peace of mind personally too. And pat yourself on the back, congratulate yourself, just like you do when you're setting your goal list and achieving those things. Um, Simplicity, as you said, that is the most important thing. If you start that way and you build your life around a whole bunch of processes, which they're going to come up one by one, that's the key to it. But it's so, so important to do that. And it's really easy to do rather than just throw up your hands and say, how am I going to do this? Or throw out the box and forgetting how you do that and searching through that and having garbage all over yourself just to microwave something. It's just the way that it happens. So how long? Yeah, the last time it was oozing out of the microwave. So these are the things that they sound funny. We laugh at it and so on and so forth. And sometimes we laugh at ourselves, but it's simple.
And that simple is the key. Especially talking about organization and processes. I tend to talk a lot about the book Getting Things Done by David Allen. And in that book, he actually says the best processes are ones you can do when you have the flu. Think about having the flu. Your head hurts, your body hurts, you can't think straight, you can barely move. If you can complete a process when you're in that condition, then that's a really good process because it's easy to follow. It's taking the pressure off you having to think about it. And when you are operating at your peak, you can zip through that really quickly and get more done. So you want to make these processes as simple as you can. Simplicity is the key. So we are just about at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for all of this
Well,
for our listeners?
obviously, simplicity, number one. Number two, the basics. And I loved your A word. Assume that you don't know anything and start from the most, again, the simplest thing possible, even if you're just saying da, da, da as it's going along. So you put those things together and you put together processes for whatever you are doing in your life, and you will be a whole lot more consistent. You'll be a whole lot more efficient. You'll be have a lot more clarity in your life, and that's what it's all about. And if you can help other people do the same just by helping them develop their simple processes too, more power to you. Share the love.
Absolutely. I think for me, again, simplicity is the key. And I think that's the most important thing. You don't want to add complexity to your life. There's enough complexity out there. Make things simple for yourself. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. When you put together your processes, and again, you've probably already been putting processes together. You may have called them something else. But again, when you're putting together a recipe, that's a process. When you put together a habit for, putting your kid to bed, that's a process. When you put together a morning routine, that's a process. So whether you call them habits, routines, processes, traditions, however you refer to it, it's about getting the same result as easy as possible. And that's the core of a process. And the more you can do that, the less stress you'll deal with, and the more you'll get done, and the higher quality of the work you're doing will be. So focus on that simplicity and get everything you need to done. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.